Hello, this is Michael from Fujifilm, and this is the first From the Workbench video for the year 2022. And in this one, instead of talking about Fujifilm cameras and Fujinon lenses, instead I'm going to talk about a movie that I got to be the cinematographer on not too long ago where we used Fujifilm cameras and lenses. But in this particular episode, I'm going to talk about some of the challenges I ran into on location lighting and give you some ideas on how you can solve things for yourselves. So in this particular movie, which was a real low budget, we shot most of it in a house that we borrowed from a family member. Now, the house was occupied by a rather large family, so we had to be in and out of the house in only 5 days. Yeah, we shot an entire feature film in only 5 days in basically one location. Now, this house was built sometime in the 1960s, and back then it was a popular style to put in a built-in recessed fluorescent light fixture into kitchens. Okay? Now, when I say recessed, I mean the ceiling is the light bank. The light bank is the ceiling. This was a very popular style for a long time. So you've got 4-foot tubes, and then there's plexiglass panels that are used to diffuse the light. Now, the other problem with this is that it also lowers the ceiling height. So instead of having 8 feet of ceiling, I only had about 7 feet of ceiling, which meant that this light bank was going to end up in almost every shot, and it made it difficult to keep it out. But as you probably know, fluorescents have a lot of problem when we're shooting both stills and cinema. The color tends to be really bad. In particular, they are very low in the good colors that we need to make skin tones look nice. This was a very talky, dramatic feature, so it was all about people. We needed skin tones to look good. Fluorescent lights are not good for skin tones. So let me tell you first how I solved it before I go into some of the details. I solved this problem by using RGB tubes, LED tubes that are battery powered. Now, these happen to be made by Nanlite. There are some other brands on the market. But what was really cool about this is that I simply took these and I put them up in that giant fixture. I actually left the fluorescents in place and I wired these right underneath the fluorescent tubes. I used the fluorescent tubes to hold these up in place. Now, we were never ever actually going to turn on the light switch on the fluorescent fixture, so this wasn't a problem. Like I said, these are battery powered, which is really good because I didn't want to have AC power cords hanging down anywhere that I had to worry about. So I could plug in the AC power at lunch or overnight, charge up the internal batteries, get rid of that power cord, just close everything up with the plexiglass panels, and then these would run for hours and hours and hours. Better still, these were remote controllable by way of a very simple direct remote control. You didn't need to have Wi-Fi or anything, and therefore I could do color presets and change the intensity up and down. So first I want to talk about the color presets because this kitchen was being used both in daytime shots and nighttime shots. So I needed to create a viable way to adjust the color temperature so that it would feel a little bit cooler and feel a little bit warmer. All right. Basically, we shot the cameras always at 4500 Kelvin for the white balance. We just locked it in there and left it that way. But by cheating the lights warmer and cooler, I could achieve a different feeling. I could also then match it depending on whether we had daylight coming through the window or no light coming through that kitchen window. Most importantly, back to the color purity. These RGB LED tubes that you can get now are really, really good for color. Now, some of them are not perfect, and there are LED tubes out there that have 4, 5, even 6 LED colors in them. But for the purposes that I was doing here of this kitchen, having just red, green, and blue was good enough, and like I said, much, much better than the fluorescents. Now, there are high-quality color corrected fluorescent tubes that you can get. They've been on the market for like 20 years. Also, there are off-the-shelf replacement 4-foot tubes that you could buy at the home improvement store that have LED strips inside instead of fluorescents. And they're designed to save you power because they're like 5 watts instead of being 40 watts. But here are the drawbacks. One, I wanted to be able to dim the lights as necessary. Two, like I said, I wanted to be able to change the color as necessary. Now, regular fluorescent fixtures are not dimmable usually by nature. Also, because it was low budget and this was an occupied house, we didn't have time to monkey around with the built-in light switch. We didn't have time to put in dimmers or anything like that. I also found that these retrofit LED tubes that you can get at the home improvement store, now this may not be true of all of them, but the ones that I bought and tested actually had a lot of green in them. They were not really pretty. They look perfectly good to your eye, but they are designed to be a low-cost, low-power replacement for standard traditional fluorescent tubes. So I didn't like that option either. So RGB battery-powered remote-controlled tubes came to my rescue in this kitchen. Now, elsewhere in the house, there were a couple of ceiling fans, one in the dining room and one in the living room. And again, ceiling fans, they hang down a couple of feet off the ceiling, and they had screw-in candelabra base light bulbs. Okay, these are very common. You find them everywhere. I had the same problem. These fans were going to be almost in every shot. So if I couldn't avoid them, I needed to find a way to make the lights that were in them work with what I was trying to create. So the solution for that was I took out the regular tungsten bulbs that were in there. Again, because they were tungsten, they're a fixed 3200. And I wanted to play with that. And I found these Wi-Fi tunable LED bulbs, again, in the lighting section of the home improvement store. These are made by a couple of different major lighting manufacturers. Now, I want to say that in my testing, the color purity that comes out of these is nowhere near the color purity of light fixtures that are made for cinema and still photography. These are designed for the eyeball, okay? But these were relatively inexpensive, and I bought a bunch of them. And you set them up by way of a remote app on your phone that goes through a Wi-Fi network, but you can purchase a separate remote control that you pair with banks of lights. So I had a remote control for the dining room, I had a remote control for the living room, I had another remote control for some recessed lightings, and once I dialed in some of the presets, all I had to do was hit a button and the lights would quickly change just like that, and we could move very quickly. Now, I use these ceiling fan lights to create just sort of the ambience of the light in the room. They were not the primary illumination on the actors. The primary illumination was done by way of very, very high quality LED light banks that were on stands on the floor, okay, all around the room. So by balancing your floor lighting with the overhead lighting and by tuning it to the different levels that looks right on camera, you can very, very easily fool the audience into thinking the lighting is coming from one place or another. And this is a good way to do this without breaking the bank. All right, I hope you found this helpful. See you next time.